We're filming for the Hamilton College Jazz Archive in Aspen, Colorado. It's my pleasure to be talking with Joe Temperley today, saxophonist, baritonist, and sopranoist.
Yes.
All the other ists.
Yeah.
Yeah, bass clarinetist.
Mm-hmm.
We're just talking about the hazards of, not hazards, but the things you have to deal with being on the road and traveling in a plane.
Oh, yes.
Does that get tiring?
It really, it gets really exhausting, yeah. I mean, I've had a flight case made for the baritone. I've been using it for the past 20-odd years because I discovered I got into too many arguments with flight attendants and flight stewards and people like that, and it just wasn't worth it. So I got the anvil case, really good case, really beautiful case, and it just goes underneath, and it makes life that much easier.
Out of the work you do, how much of it involves going away from your home?
Well, I mean, I don't travel around per se all the time. I'm in the, like, I've come out here, but I haven't been on the road in 2 or 3 months. I do most of my work in New York. I do a lot of freelance work in New York, and I work in various different places. I work with Junior Mance, and we have a trio and sometimes a quartet, you know. So when I do go traveling, it's very pleasant. You know, I do things like a trip on to Norway, or, you know, this year we went to the festival in Bern, but it's only like 3 or 4 days, you know. Yeah. It's not a continuous thing. Although next year, in the whole of February and March, I'm going to be traveling with the Lincoln Center Jazz Orchestra with Wynton Marsalis. Yeah. So that's going to be a whole big trip for 8 weeks.
Quite an operation to move a whole orchestra like that.
Yeah, we have 3 weeks in the United States, and then we have 3 weeks in Asia, and then we come back and do another 2 weeks in the United States. Wow. So it's a big trip.
Yeah. I didn't know you worked with Junior Mance. He's one of my favorites.
Oh yeah, I work a lot with Junior Mance. Yeah. We have a new record coming out in the next couple of weeks on chiaroscuro that we recorded on Norway with Keita Betts on bass and Jackie Williams on drums, Junior and myself, and it turned out very good, you know. They just kept recording us every night. We played, I think, 4, maybe 5 nights on the boat, and they recorded everything. And now they say they have enough stuff for 2 CDs. So we'll see. One of them comes out in the next couple of weeks.
Did you happen to play a tune with him called Harlem Lullaby?
No, I didn't.
Well, you ask him about that tune.
I will, yeah.
It's a great tune he wrote years ago.
Oh, yeah?
It's got a real nice sound to it.
No, the only thing we play of Junior's actual compositions is Jubilation, which, of course, was recorded by a lot of different people, you know, like Cannonball and Benny Golson, and I think Benny Golson made a recent recording of it, and Jesse Davis made a recent recording of it. So Junior really gets a lot of mileage out of Jubilation.
That's nice to write a tune earlier in your career that you know, has some life to it like that. Absolutely.
Yeah, he gets a lot of mileage out of that.
Well, growing up in Scotland, right, your hometown was what?
Cowdenbeath. That's
I wasn't going to try to pronounce that.
Cowdenbeath is about maybe 20 miles northeast of Edinburgh. It's in Fife, actually. It's over the other side of the Forth Bridge.
Okay.
And it's in the Kingdom of Fife. And that's the only county in Scotland that's actually called a kingdom. So I grew up there, but I left there when I was like 17 or 18, 17 maybe.
What kind of music did you hear as a child?
Well, the only kind of music that I vividly remember is dance bands on the radio. You know, bands like Henry Hall and Geraldo and those kind of bands. And then when I got a bit older, when I got to be around 14 or 15, I started playing the saxophone when I was 14. And when I was about, of course there was no music schools, excuse me, there was no music schools or anything like that, so I just had to have, I had a few lessons locally, and then I just had to get on with it myself, more or less, you know. I'm still doing that. And the first introduction to jazz, actually, I had was Camp Calloway's band with it was a saxophone record. On one side was Chu Berry playing Ghost of a Chance. On the other side was Willow Weep for Me with Hilton Jefferson. So I'd spoken to Milt Hinton about that because he was he was there. So that's what I vividly remember, you know. And of course I remember some things like Benny Goodman, Sing Sing Sing, but you know, it was a very short time. These were 78s, and they were very scarce. You know, American jazz was very scarce in Scotland. Still is, as a matter of fact.
Yeah. Did you get to hear a chance to hear any of these artists? Would they ever come to Scotland?
No.
No.
Not while I was there. Much later they did. I mean, they do now. They travel around quite a bit now. And the thing, I spoke to Conte Condoli last night about this because there was a union band, the British Musicians Union didn't allow American musicians to come in to the country to play. So when Conte Condoli came to Ireland with Stan Kenton in 1953, I was working with an English band that also was working in Dublin at the same time. So we got to see the concert. And that band had Lee Konitz and Zoot Sims and Bill Holman, people like that, Conte Condoli and Frank Rossellino. You know, that was a great band. But that was the first really American jazz orchestra that I ever, you know, encountered.
Mm-hmm. At what point in your early years as a saxophonist did you make a conscious decision that you were going to make a living as a musician?
No, it just sort of grew, you know, just sort of grew on me, I guess. You know, when I first started off in Scotland, I went to work in a nightclub in Glasgow, and that was a traumatic experience for me. Even though I was only moving 50 miles from my hometown, you know, my accent, for instance, was completely different to a Glasgow accent. I was a real country bumpkin.
Just 50 miles away.
50, well, you know, the accents in the British Isles are very regional. You know, you can, even in London, there's about 4 or 5 completely different accents. You know, North London is completely different to South London, and yeah, I mean, you wouldn't really sort of think about that until you actually live there and you can hear the difference. You know, and this one in Scotland, you know, when I went to Glasgow, that was a big traumatic experience for me, and I started, you know, playing little bits of jazz and going to jazz clubs, and I had a gig in a nightclub with a 5-piece band, and there was a trumpet player. His name was Jimmy Morgan, and he had come up from London. You know, he'd been living in London for a long time, and I learned a lot of stuff from him. You know, him talking about music and talking about playing, and this is how you do this and that. I learned a lot. You know, and that's how. In those days, that's how you came to gain knowledge, by listening to other people and actually experiencing it for yourself. Mm-hmm. You know, nowadays I teach at the Manhattan School of Music, and it's a whole different thing. You know, the kids today are in danger or maybe of learning too much too fast. You know, and it sort of homogenizes their playing. It tends to make them sound like samey.
Uh-huh. That they have too much knowledge and no place to use it, or
right? Yeah, that kind of thing too. Hmm. But they have, you know, the physicality of the playing doesn't you know, it doesn't come together with the knowledge that they gain. You know, like the harmonic knowledge and the you know, the practice of scales and things like that. And when they have to apply it to playing jazz, it confuses them. Whereas, you know, in the old days we just learned a tune. We didn't know that you had to play this scale for this chord, or you know, mm-hmm. we learned tunes, and we learned how to deal with them. You learn the harmony of the song and learn how to deal with it. Right. But it's a whole different thing now.
Yeah. What kind of tunes were you playing in this club in was it Edinburgh, you said, or
in Glasgow? Oh, I don't know. You know, things like you know, My Blue Heaven and Blue Skies, and you know, those kind of standards. Yeah.
Was there a sense of that this music was coming out of America and that we wanted to get our hands on it, that the records of it were something to search out for you guys?
Oh yes, yeah, it was very important. That was very important to search out records, you know, because they were very scarce, and you didn't see many 78s in those days. So when a new record came, you know, a new record would be maybe Benny Goodman's Sing Sing Sing, and everybody would have to get this copy of Sing Sing Sing. You'd have to order it. It would have to come from London or somewhere, you know. It was a whole big operation.
Yeah.
Nowadays, you know, nowadays you have everything on hand.
You sure do.
The whole history of jazz is right there before you.
And one CD collection.
Right,
Yeah.
yes, yeah. I mean, I think of myself, I have maybe about 60 or 70 Duke Ellington CDs, you know. In those days, the only Duke Ellington song I probably knew would be maybe Take the A-Train or something.
Yeah. Interesting that you ended up playing with them, but we'll get to that.
Yes.
You played with Humphrey Littleton.
Mm-hmm.
He was he one of the well-known jazz people in the
Yeah,
United Kingdom?
Humphrey Littleton was, he started off like in the traditional jazz field, you know, with banjos and stuff like that. And then gradually, over a period of time, gradually, by listening to, you know, his hero was always Louis Armstrong and Sidney Bechet. But then he became, his taste became more Catholic, and he started developing a liking for people like Roy Eldridge and Buck Clayton, and then Buck Clayton became a big friend. You know, Buck Clayton used to come over and do a lot of tours with us. Buck Clayton and Jimmy Rushing, or Buck Clayton and Big Joe Turner, and we used to do tours on the continent, and this was in the 50s, you know, and Humphrey was, you know, Humphrey's a very sort of, he's a tremendously educated man. He went to Eton, and I mean, he's a real scholar, and for him to make a career of being a jazz musician is sort of it's sort of off the wall in England, if you
Yeah.
you know, in English high society and stuff, you
Should
know.
be teaching at a university somewhere.
Yeah, well, no, you should be a member of parliament,
Oh.
or in the army, you know,
Uh-huh.
a colonel in the guards or something.
Yeah. Well, when was the first trip to the United States?
The first trip was with Humphrey's band in 1959. We came with the Newport Jazz Tour, and what it consisted of about 6 or 7 different groups. There was Humphrey, and there was another English group that was co-led by Alan Ganley and Ronnie Ross, and then there was American groups like George Shearing with the brass section. He had just made a record with the brass section. And there was George Shearing and Cannonball Adderley and Nat with their group, with and also Thelonious Monk, which was a big eye-opener for me, to actually be on a tour with Thelonious Monk Quartet and be able to see Thelonious Monk working every night and hear, you know, Charlie Rouse's approach to playing and Thelonious playing the piano. That was really a big eye-opener for me. And coming to New York City, of course, I spent a lot of time going down to the 5-spot, and at that time Benny Golson was working at the 5-spot with Curtis Fuller, and I used to go there a lot, and then of course being on tour with Cannonball Adderley and being on tour with Thelonious Monk, and you know, when it actually came time to leave New York, I said to the drummer in the band, I said, this place is just something that I must come back to. I have to come back to New York. And I did. 6 years later, I came back to New York. And if I'd known what I was getting into, I probably wouldn't have done it, you know. But I came back, and I didn't really know anybody. I didn't have a job. And but 6 months later, I started working with Woody Herman's band.
Yeah.
Through Jake Hanna and Nat Pierce got me on Woody Herman's band, and I just sort of went from there.
Did you have to wait to get into the union?
Yes, it took 6 months to get into the union. Local 802. It doesn't take that. It takes 6 minutes now,
Yeah.
or even 6 seconds. You know, they're dying to get people
They
in the
need the
union.
dues,
Oh
yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
But at that time, it was like 6 months wait. So I waited it out, and
What did you do during those 6 months?
I worked in Corvettes, in selling audio equipment, and that was an experience too, of course. all of a sudden, you know, I went from playing every night, playing my saxophone and all that, all of a sudden I'm working in a retail store.
Uh-huh.
But, you know, it served its purpose. And,
That's right.
and,
Puts things in perspective for
yes,
you.
absolutely, yeah. And, you know, living in New York, I started going out, hearing people, and became friendly with people like Pepper Adams and Cecil Payne and you know, different people. And then, you know, I spent, maybe 18 months with Woody's band. But it was very hard then. It was very rigorous. I couldn't deal with all those bus trips, you know.
Oh, constant, huh?
Every day, you know, 10 hours, 12 hours a day. And then playing a gig at the end of it, you know.
Yeah.
Phil Woods had a funny remark. He said, you know, when these kids graduate from school, he said they should be taken and they should all be put in a bus, and they should pull the blinds down, and the bus should just ride around the campus for about 10 hours, and then they should all get out and go into the gym and play a 4-hour gig, and then get back in the bus and ride for another 10 hours, and then see if they want to really be musicians. That was before they get presented with their diploma.
Yeah. You passed the bus test.
Yes,
Now
oh
you
yeah.
may graduate.
Yeah. It's a different thing nowadays. You don't do that anymore.
Yeah. Well, it's good and bad, I suppose, because now there's not as many venues for the big bands. But who else was on that herd at the time?
Well, the saxophone section was strictly Italian. It was Sal Nistico and Joe Romano and Carmen Leggio.
Some good tenors there.
Oh, it was wonderful. It was really wonderful. And there was a good band. And Woody, you know, Woody was going through some bad times because, you know, things were rough on the road, and Woody was having to deal with income tax problems, and, you know, some nights he would just say, you know, I'll see you all later, and he would dodge out the back because he had this thing about spotting people. He could spot an IRS man, you know, coming in the door, he'd be out the back door and gone, you know.
Oh, that's too bad.
But Woody was a great experience too.
Yeah. Well, you have sat in a number of good big band sections.
Oh yes.
Yeah, Buddy Rich and.
I didn't work with Buddy all the time. I always seemed to work with Buddy when he was looking for a baritone player. But I would never do that. I would never go out with Buddy's band. Buddy was too strict for me. I couldn't deal with that.
It was a taskmaster, to put it nicely.
Well, I mean, we used to play a set, and then get everybody in the band room and tell everybody how rotten they all were and how they couldn't play, and you had to deal with all these lectures all the time.
Yeah, really, he really built up the morale, huh?
But he had some good bands.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Some good records.
Yeah, he had some good bands.
How about the thing with Thad Jones and?
Well, that came about when I used to sub sometimes for Pepper, and I think it was around 68, somewhere around there, 68 or 69, Pepper's mother got very sick, and he decided that he wanted to go back to Detroit to take care of her, which I thought was a wonderful thing for anyone, especially in his position in mid-career, you know.
Yeah.
He was very well-known and world-renowned, and for him to just pick up and go back to Detroit, it was a wonderful thing to do. Anyway, I subbed for Pepper in the Thad Jones band, and the subbing consisted of about maybe 2.5 to 3 years before he finally came back. So I had a lot of great experience, and I made a wonderful record with that band called Central Park North, which, you know, I still listen to that record, and it's a great band. That was a wonderful band.
Thad wrote some really innovative charts.
The great thing about Thad's writing, though, it was always so beautifully melodic. You know, you could take it down when we used to be rehearsing with a saxophone section. You could slow it down and play every part real slow, and it was, you know, a beautiful melodic part. It was really, he was really ingenious, and it was a great experience too.
And you did the Monday nights at
the Vanguard every Monday. And you used to see all kinds of people used to come in there. You know, Don Bias, Ray Nance, Paul Gonsalves, and a whole lot of people used to come in on Monday nights. It used to be a wonderful experience.
Who were your influences?
But the thing about, I must say, tell you this, when I actually played with the Thad Jones-Mel Lewis band, I was so overawed by the feeling of playing in that band, and I couldn't play for looking at everybody, you know, for looking at Snooky Young and Jimmy Nottingham and Mel Lewis and Richard Davis and Jerome Richardson and, you know, and Joe Farrell and all these people that were in the band. It was just a numbing experience for me. I would like to do it now, you know.
Yeah.
I'd like to really do that again now.
That was quite a roster of,
Oh,
everyone was a soloist.
the saxophone section was Jerome Richardson and Jerry Dodgen and Joe Farrell and Eddie Daniels and myself. It was amazing.
That's great. 1974 was a pretty significant
Yes.
year
Hmm.
for the Ellington.
That's when I went with the Ellington band. Yes. That came about with John Gensel, the pastor at the Lutheran Church on 54th Street and Lexington Avenue. He was the shepherd of the night flock. He was the pastor for the jazz community, John Gensel. Asked me to play at Harry Carney's funeral.
Uh-huh.
So I played Sophisticated Lady at Harry's funeral. Harry was a good friend of mine, too. And that's how that came about. You know, a few weeks later, I was in the band.
Yeah. How did you meet Harry?
I met him in England when the band used to come. Humphrey, when the Ellington band used to come to England, Humphrey used to buy tickets for everybody in the band, you know. And we used to go, the first time the Ellington band came to England, they did maybe 26 concerts, and we probably saw 21 or 22 of them. We just used to follow them around all over the place. And every night we'd walk in, we'd see everybody, and they would say, oh, you guys are here again. You know, they couldn't figure out why we were at the concerts all the time. But it was such, you know, Duke Ellington, that was such a thing to go and watch that band and see all those people that were in the band.
They had the whole, that was the prime
Oh, yes.
Hodges and Harry.
Harry and Paul and Jimmy Hamilton. That was amazing.
Were they on every night as much from one night to the next? Can you remember that?
Well, yeah. No, they weren't on every night. I mean, sometimes they sound like a high school band.
Yeah.
And then, you know, they could be sounding terrible. And 10 or 15 minutes later, they sound like something you've never heard in your life before. You know, they were just absolute. The way they could turn it on. I maybe if they saw somebody walking in or somebody came in to see them, or all of a sudden the band would be transformed into something entirely different. You know, because that band traveled all the time. They were tired, you know.
Yeah. Years and years.
But it was
on the
amazing.
road.
It was an amazing band. And it still is, you know. It's still the premier jazz orchestra of all time, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. So was Mercer leading the band
Yes.
after 74?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Mercer became the band leader. And I got along pretty well with Mercer. You know, Mercer was a very nice man. It's just, you know, I couldn't stay in the band because I couldn't do all that traveling. I just had enough of traveling, you know, constant bus riding and traveling around all the time. I just had enough of it.
I don't know how people do that for years and years. I mean, think of Harry Carney. Some 30.
Well, it was different though.
30
The band was different then. I mean, they were on a mission. The band was entirely different. Mercer's band wasn't like that at all. You know,
Yeah.
half the people in the band didn't know anything about Duke Ellington,
Mm.
so it was a different thing.
Yeah.
And then when the Ellington band was in its prime, of course, the musicians couldn't work in the studios in New York because because of the racial thing.
Yeah.
So that's why the Basie band was together all the time, and that's why the Ellington band was together, and that's why the Basie band, the Ellington band, was so much better than all the other bands, because they had a constant personnel. The other bands, you know, you came in, you made a name, you stayed 4 or 5, 6 months, and then you went to CBS or NBC, and you know, that was it. That was your career.
Yeah. So for the black musicians, playing with Ellington or Basie was the
That
height.
that was a career in itself. That was
Yeah.
that was as good as you can get.
Hmm.
And of course, that made the band great.
Yeah. The studio scene in New York, what kinds of situations did you find yourself in doing studio work? Was it, did you do jingle work and all that kind of stuff? You still
Yeah.
doing that?
I'm still doing that,
Uh-huh.
but not. I never did that on a full-time basis. I just do odd jingles. I do jingles, but just now and again. You know, it's not a steady thing. I do some record dates for different people, but it's just people that request me, that want me to do the record date. You know, rather than some contractor calling up. You know,
Some other baritone
yeah,
player.
just want a baritone player.
Yeah.
That tends to be a small clique of people that play all the instruments, you know. If they want a baritone player, they'll get an alto player, and he'll come in and play the baritone, and that's how that works.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't, you know, I don't do a full-time
Yeah.
job, but I wouldn't want to really do that all the time.
Of your contemporaries on the instrument these days, who do you feel are up there in the top league? I know that you're fond of Ernie Sakaris in his day.
Oh yes, Anna Caceres, and of course Harry Carney was always my idol. I really thought Harry Carney was the epitome of the sound of the baritone.
Mm-hmm.
I like other people. I like Cecil Payne. I'm very fond of Cecil Payne, and he's a very good personal friend of mine. And but I mean, before that, I was attracted to his playing tremendously, especially when he was at the height of his powers in the 50s and early 60s. Cecil's approach to the baritone was just wonderful. But I like other people. You know, I like Pepper a lot, and I like Nick Brignola and Ronnie Cuber and Gary Smullian and people like that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that are playing today. And of course, I love Jerry Mulligan. Jerry was a good friend of mine too, and I've actually done some concerts, memorial concerts.
Uh-huh.
We did one with the Lincoln Center band at Lincoln Center, and I went to Vienna and did one with Bob Brookmeyer and Lee Connors. So that's interesting too. We might do some more of that. I don't know.
Yeah. But you're also playing the soprano quite a bit.
Oh yes, I've
Yeah.
played the soprano a long time.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
But you know, I play the tenor quite a bit. I like to play the tenor, but I don't play the tenor as much as I would like to. But I play it in school. You know, I have 2 or 3 tenor students
Uh-huh.
in school, so I get to play the tenor, and then I do some gigs and things, odd things, and sometimes with the Lincoln Center band, I'm sort of like you know. Sometimes I play the tenor in different situations. Sometimes I play the soprano, and of course I play the baritone and bass clarinet. So I'm kind of a utility man there,
Mm-hmm.
as well as being the baritone player there.
Yeah.
Like in this upcoming Sidney Bechet concert, I'm going to be playing the soprano, which I'm looking forward to.
Do you, in that situation, are you trying to emulate him as close as possible?
No.
No.
Not at all. Wynton doesn't encourage that. He likes you to, you know, like if we play Ellington music, he likes you to play your own idea of what you think it should be,
Mm-hmm.
rather than just play the solos note for note. You know, then you know it's not. I don't think it's a fair reproduction, because you can't play like that. You know, I can't sound like Harry Carney.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody else can't sound like Cootie Williams, you know, and somebody else can't sound like Paul Gonsalves. You know, you can't do it.
We can listen to their records if we want
Of
to hear
course,
them.
yeah. And you can, you know, you can play your own way in that particular feeling, but you can't impersonate them.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's a good thing.
What's your outlook on the state of jazz these days?
Well, it's kind of fragmented, you know, the jazz situation, and people. I think, for instance, I think all the supposed young lions just should be playing with each other instead of all having their own bands. You know, when things were at the height, you know, Miles Davis Sextet or Miles Davis Quintet, you know, was Miles Davis and Coltrane and Philly Joe and Red Garland and Paul Chambers, you know. But nowadays, every one of those people would have their own band.
Uh-huh.
And I don't think that's really a good thing. I think all these young people should be playing with each other and develop, because that's the way that's the only way they can develop. And I think that's one aspect of it. And I think the jazz situation is very healthy. There's you know, we see a lot of kids at Lincoln Center. A lot of young people come to our rehearsals and they get involved, and Winton encourages them to play. You know, when we go out on tour, he goes to all the different schools. Sometimes we go with him, sometimes he goes by himself. But he does encourage all young people to play instruments, play jazz, and to play blues and swing, you know. And he thinks that, I think it's very important too, to play blues and swing.
Well, blues has got to be a part of the jazz music. And I was interested in hearing the second set last night that they opened up with a blues tune.
Yeah.
And it was really nice.
Right.
You know, just to hear some wailing.
Yeah. You know, I mean, I think a lot of the trouble today is that the playing becomes too homogenized. Too many people sound alike. But you know, I mean, I'm very interested in golf, and that's what's happening with golf too, because people go to golf school and they all come out with the same swing, and they all look the same, and they all play the same. They all play the same way, you know. And it's, for instance, in the old days, you could tell a musician by his vibrato, you know. Ben Webster had a different vibrato completely to Lester Young or Coleman Hawkins or Don Byas or Lucky Thompson, you know. Each one had an individual sound. You could tell 2 notes of Zoot Sims and you knew that was Zoot, 2 notes of Stan Getz and you knew that was Stan. There couldn't be anybody else. That was who they were, you know. That doesn't happen anymore. You know, you can't, you could identify Roy Eldridge, you know. Last night I was sitting in one of the intermissions and they played a record of Prez, you know. And I was just reminiscing about Vic Dickinson. You know, Vic, I used to go every Wednesday to hear Vic Dickinson because his style was so personal, you know. Play all out the side of his mouth and play all those beautiful things that he used to play. But it was so personal and so real, you know. And that band with Roy Eldridge and Prez and Vic Dickinson sounded amazing. And there was 3, you know, completely identifiable people. Conde Condola said that can only be little jazz, you know.
That can only be what?
Little jazz, Roy Eldridge.
Oh, yeah. As you say, that they were all giants, but they were all playing together.
Yes, and I think that made the music better too. You know, they weren't playing from some 5-star hotel, you know, with a corporate account and you know and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It was different.
What's your favorite recent recording of yours? I know you did a concerto for Joe.
No,
Nice.
well,
Not your most recent though.
it was, but it was done in too much of a hurry
Yeah.
to be my favorite. I liked the one I did with Dave McKenna. That turned out
the
pretty
duet.
good. The duet.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love playing with Dave McKenna. I mean, that's another thing, such a distinctive style, you know. Nobody can play that rhythmic pulse like he can, you know. That's another thing that's a bygone thing. But, you know, I'm always looking, maybe the next record will be the one, you know. I don't tend to listen to the records that I've made particularly. You know, I hear them a couple of times and say, oh yeah, it's okay. But I could have done this or I could have done that. Or
Right.
This could have been better. So it always can be better. And I feel that, you know, if you feel like that, you know, it always will be better. I think it's, you know, it's important to just keep forging ahead.
Yeah, to not do one recording and think that that's the best you can do.
Oh no.
Yeah. Well, I have a photo here. I wonder if you recall this particular.
Oh, yeah, that was a chiaroscuro session with Buck Clayton.
And
And Joe and I were playing ping pong that day.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Zoot was a good friend. He was a beautiful musician too.
I think Milt Hinton probably took that.
Yeah.
It's out of his book.
He did, yes. Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
That was the great saxophone section too. That was Bud Johnson and Earl Warren and Zoot and myself. That was beautiful.
Wow, Earl Warren.
Yeah, Earl Warren.
Yeah.
Smiley.
Yeah, Smiley. Okay.
Earl Warren had one of the best golf swings I ever saw in my life.
No kidding.
Oh, he was beautiful, wonderful golfer. And one of the best swings I ever saw.
Gee, the musicians, there's a lot of musicians who love golf.
Oh, yeah. Well, golf is very inventive too, you know.
Uh-huh.
But I used to play a lot of golf with Earl. I used to play a lot with Lou Donaldson too. Used to meet Lou Donaldson on the golf course quite often.
Wow.
But that particular session for Buck, the Earl Father Hines was on piano, and Gus Johnson on drums, and Milt Hinton, and Joe Newman, and Irby Green, and Doc Cheatham. It was like a dream, you know. I miss Buck Clayton because he was a real dear friend of mine. In fact, I'm now the leader of the Buck Clayton Band. We've been doing some things in New York with Buck's music, and I've sort of been designated to be the leader, so it's quite exciting to go out and play Buck's music.
Who's taking the trumpet part in that?
Well, we have different people. We have Byron Stripling and Randy Sankey, and Riley Mullins, the young fellow, and you know, different people do it. We have Britt Woodman, Art Barron, and Jerry Dodgen, and Harry Allen. You know, it's quite exciting.
Amazing circle of musicians you
Oh,
have to
yes.
choose from.
Right, yeah. Dick Katz plays piano, and sometimes we have Joe Ascione or Akira Tanner played a couple times with us, you know, and Dennis Irwin played with us a couple of weeks ago. So we have a big roster of musicians to draw on in New York. And they're all familiar with the music and familiar with the band. They've all played on the band from time to time.
What's the scene like in New York City right now for you as far as gigging right in the city?
Well,
I know you have the Lincoln Center.
I'm busier now than I've ever been.
Yeah?
Yes. Like next week I'm working at the Knickerbocker, and then the week after I'm working at Zeno's. I do Zeno's quite a bit with Junior. And we have a couple of concerts at Lincoln Center, Ellington concert, and then we have a benefit concert with Oscar Peterson, and then the Sidney Bechet concert. And I took on some things to work at Cafe Carlisle with Bobby Short. So, you know, I'm really busy until the end of the year, until the middle of January. And then I go on this tour. We start rehearsing for this tour, which takes me up till the end of March. Then I'm going to England for Scotland for a couple of weeks.
I was just going to ask if you ever have occasion to get back to Scotland.
Yeah, I was there a year ago, a year past February. I have a high school band there. We started off doing a seminar in the summertime. We started off with like 15 kids, and now there's 75 kids, and there's 3 different bands. There's, you know, there's like a band from like 8 years old to 11, and there's another band from 11 to 14, and another band from 14 to 16 or 17. So now it's growing, and in fact, we're trying to arrange for them to come to Lincoln Center, because you know at Lincoln Center we have a high school competition, Ellington competition, with all. It started off with 7 states. In fact, it started off with just the 3 states around New York, New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. Now, then it grew to 7 states. Now it's the whole eastern part of the United States, all the way to the Mississippi. So now there's 38 bands going to be at Lincoln Center next May. So I'm involved in that too. I go out and do some clinics with that. And a couple of years ago I did some of the judging. Last year I was a mentor, which means you go up and play with the school bands and you sort of prime them for the competition. So that's very interesting.
Wow.
To do things like that. So, you know, I keep busy all the time.
That's good.
Thank God.
And when you leave here, your very next thing, you said, is
The Knickerbocker.
Knickerbocker.
And of course I have all my teaching to do too. You know, I have to give 6 students, 14 lessons in a semester.
Uh-huh.
It's a lot.
That must be hard to juggle too with.
Yeah,
with
I have to
travel.
juggle it. That's exactly what I have to do, is juggle it. But that's very interesting. I really like doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And I learn just as much from them as they do from me. So it's really interesting to do that.
Yeah. Plus, they get to see what a professional has to deal with
Yeah.
in the real world of music.
And I play with them all the time, you know. I mean, I play duets with them, and I play with them. You know, we play different songs and different kinds of blues and go through different chord sequences and things like that. And it's interesting to try and get the kids motivated into doing that. You know,
Mhm.
like for instance, one kid came to me. He said, "Oh, I've just recorded a CD." I said, "Oh, that's nice." He said, "What kind of tunes did you play?" He said, "Oh, I played giant steps." So I said, "How can you play giant steps when you can't play the blues? You know, how could you tackle giant steps?" I don't know, but these kids have a lot of chutzpah. You know, they really know. You know, he probably played the melody of giant steps, but God knows what he played after that.
Can't imagine.
So it's very interesting.
That's a good one. Yeah. You better do giant steps on your next record to show them how it's done.
Oh yeah, I don't know if I could tackle that because it took John Coltrane 2 years to learn how to play that.
Yeah.
You don't just do that in 5 minutes.
Well, I've enjoyed talking with you today.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. Yes.
And I wish you all the best.
Thank
and,
you.
Hope to hear your soprano sax again tonight.
Oh yeah, I'm going to play tonight. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to play with Ralph tonight. The first set tonight is with Ralph, so I'd
Mhm.
love to play the soprano with Ralph.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to surprise him and play Poor Butterfly tonight.
I'm just fascinated by watching the interaction that goes on stage, especially when you're doing in the middle of a tune and someone's soloing,
Mm-hmm.
and one of the horn players will start a background riff.
Yes.
You know, like last night, I can't even remember which set it was, but someone set up a 2-bar riff, and the second time the riff came around, everybody had it.
Oh yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
there's no like fumbling,
No,
trying
no.
to hear.
No.
It's almost like it was rehearsed, but I don't think
No.
it was.
Oh no, no. But I mean, there's a lot of patterns that you can play, you know. And like for instance, Connie Condoli came up with a great one last night, and we just sort of, Dan Barrett and I just jumped on it right away, and it made it sound so good. And all he said was Woody Herman, you know.
Was it I wrote a riff down I heard last night, and one of it was like bop 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 boop bop boop boo dot.
Oh, that's Norris that does all those kind of.
Does
riffs.
he?
Norris Turney, yeah. He does all those kind of riffs, yeah. Yeah.
Well, it's fun to watch as well as listen.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Well, good luck to you.
Thanks.
And
Yeah.
thanks for your time today.
Thank you very much.